Hey there, adventurers! Welcome back to another episode of the Awkward Dungeon Master. This week, I wanted to take you guys through some Unpainted minis. We are going to be comparing some of the D&D HDs that are already primed and everything from Wizards of the Coast, Wizkids, and then also we're going to be comparing them to some very similar Bones miniatures which do not come primed. So the first sets of minis that we are going to look at are the two different Tiefling miniatures. So let's take a look at Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures first. So this is the D&D Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures Tiefling Sorcerer pack. So most of the heroes for the Wizkids miniatures comes in packs of 2. So this one is $4.99. You get 2 figs, and then also 2 little bases to put them on. Garbage. So, there's your bases. Very nice. No packaging for us. So we have 2 here. So looking at these, there is a lot of detail. There's even like wrinkles in the pants. And this one's molded pretty well overall. I have had some in the past where the joints where the arms are attached have big gaps in them, or the mold sections themselves, you know, the parts that you typically will sand off, like on top of the head. The molding line there is kind of raised, so whenever you go to sand that down, you're also going to remove the primer, so there's no point in it being primed at that point. And then the other guy, that's pretty cool. Again with the clear plastic for the spell effects, and it looks like he's got a mace and it's on fire. Ooh. That's really freaking cool, guys. So the fire that kind of comes up and wraps around and down, there's a little dragon head down here at the bottom in the fire. That is really cool. This one does have some of the weirdness around this arm that was attached after molding. So I'll give you a closer look at that. But all in all, if you're just going to paint it straight out of the box, these are already pre-primed. So that's really nice, and they have pretty high detail if that's something that you are looking for. Overall, those are pretty good. So we'll set those off to the side here. This next one that we are looking at is Veloth, the Hellborn Paladin from the Darkhaven Bones miniatures, the Reaper miniatures sets. So this one's $2.99, and you only get the 1 miniature in there. But we'll take a look-see at him here. That's really cool. He has a wolf pelt on his back. That's really neat. Not as much detail on this, but also if you're not as experienced of a painter, you might prefer that. So it's going to be easier for you to get the level of detail that's on this mini instead of some of the more detailed ones that the HDs have. I do really like the shield on this one too. It's got a nice open space, so if you wanted to get really detailed and paint like a device on there, you could. So that's really cool. And I mean, when I say not as detailed, I mean, you can still see he has a hair tie in his hair. There's like rivets and things on the shield. There's individual rocks and moss on the base as well. It does not come with the sized miniature base circle like most things have in Dungeons and Dragons. But it's the right size, so it'll still fit on your mat just fine. Pretty cool. Mold lines on this one. Honestly, not too bad. I'd still clean it up around the horns again. That must just be a problem spot right there between the horns. I'm sure part of it is because it bridges between the two. It's probably a common problem with molding. Yeah, this guy's got it also. So that's probably a problem across the board with the tieflings. But I will say I have painted both types of miniatures myself before. I do have a preference. I'll get to that at the end of the video once I've given you all the pros and cons for the different kinds. But if you're going to do bones miniatures, just keep in mind there's some kind of chemical that they have to put on them to pop them out of the mold easier. So you have to wash them with soap and water before you can paint them, or the paint will just run right off. It's a horrendous pain. But do that, you shouldn't have as many problems. So, I also picked up the Familiars packs for both of these different brands. So again, let's take a look at the Wizkids. This one's specifically made for Pathfinder. This is one in the back of the box. Oh, I'm a terrible, terrible person. Again, it's $4.99. There's 3 Familiars in here. So there's our bases again. Let's take a look at these. So first off, there's Bat. Yeah, with the cast on this one, I don't know. There are mold lines, but I don't know that you'd have to clean them up. I don't think most people would notice if you're not painting for competition modules. If you're not painting for competitions, it's not as big of a deal. But that guy's pretty awesome. Just set him right there. Then a badger. His fur is really detailed. It's kind of hard to see his eyes. And there are teeth, but they're hard to see as well. The mold lines on this one are a lot more pronounced. You would definitely have to go in and clean this one up, I feel like, if you wanted it to look its best. And then the last one here is a wolf or a fox. Hard to say. Is it easier to tell in the back? It's a fox. I'm a terrible human. So that guy looks pretty good. I mean, they're fairly basic. I'd want to clean up the mold lines on him too, but just around the base a little. That one wouldn't be as noticeable. That one would not be as noticeable as the badger in the middle here. But I also got the Bones Familiars, so let's take a look at those. I'll set them next to their friends. Okay. So that's the other thing with bones too. I have a special cutting tool. You can do this with scissors and then just file down, but I have a special tool. You can buy these at hobby stores in the modeling section. It's just a special tool to help you snip flat in places, so we can go through and do that. There's a bat right here. I really like the detail on this bat, you guys. You can even see his little spine and his little tail. So these things are really tiny. I feel like you'd have to get bases for that, but or you'd lose them really easy. The weasel, if I can stop dropping him, my goodness. He has very little detail. He basically is just a blob with fur and some very faint eye divots. So overall, he's not my favorite. Okay. This guy's got a little friend here. I think it's supposed to be a wolf, but this could pass for a fox also. It's not as nice as the fox figure for the Wizkids one, but still pretty neat. I think I forgot to tell you guys the price on these ones. So, were both the same price? Yeah, they were. So the Familiars pack for Bones was also $2.99, but you got 6 Familiars instead of 3 for $4.99 from the D&D HD minis. So, oh, those were Pathfinder HD minis, excuse me. So we have a couple more to look at here. Looks like we've got a cat. I'd say slightly more detail on the face than the little ferret weasel thing, but overall a fairly undetailed mini. That one stands up on its own at least. Let's see what we got here. Oh, it's a fairy dragon. Okay. The detail on the wings for the fairy dragon familiar is really good. The base is kind of just an amorphous blob, and I can't make out any details on this little thing's face. It's basically a scaled belly with some legs and wings and then a blob for a head. But it would work just fine. The last thing we have, it's like a little eagle or a hawk of some sort. The base has okay detail on it. The back of the eagle looks great. You can see all the different layers of feathers really well. The beak is kind of blobby from the molding process. There's like a mold line in between, so it's kind of jaggedy looking. But again, it would work pretty well. Just a little bit of cleanup. So there are the familiar packs from the HD miniatures and then also the Bones miniatures. Overall, I think I guess in this case you're really going for quality over quantity, because the HDs definitely have better quality, but you get more familiars out of the Bones Familiars pack. So let's talk about a few things with this comparison, shall we? The D&D HD minis are going to be slightly more expensive per individual miniature overall. There are going to be some cases where buying Bones is slightly more expensive just depending on the mini, but as a general rule, the D&D HDs are going to be slightly more. If you are looking for the most detail, I would also definitely go with the D&D HD miniatures. And if you're wanting to paint them right out of the box, they're already primed. There is also the added value of their use of clear plastic. They do that in a lot of their hero minis. So if you really like the spell effects and things with miniatures, you're going to want to go that way. For the Bones minis, there are a couple things I have to say. You do have to wash them before you paint them, just because there's that chemical residue on them that paint doesn't like to adhere to. And then prime them if you want to. I'm terrible. I don't always prime my minis. Someone somewhere is dying a little on the inside. But overall, for the Bones miniatures, I feel like you get a good amount of detail. They're going to be easier to paint if you are not as skilled at painting miniatures as some other people are. And overall, I've always been really happy with Bones miniatures. You will sometimes get them right out of the box and like the sword will be bent like this. If that is the case, boil it on your stovetop and then stick it in ice water for like 10 minutes. You can look it up online, but I'm pretty sure it's like 10 minutes in ice water. Submerge it after you've boiled it, and it will straighten that plastic out the way it's supposed to be. So there are ways around that sort of con to having Bones minis. I will say though, for hero minis and large monsters, or medium or larger monsters, I overall prefer Bones. For whatever reason, I always get better paints out of them than I do on D&D HDs. and this is going to sound really weird, but I think there's almost too much detail. It's hard for you to get all of that to pop without spending 6 to 8 hours on each mini. And I'm sorry, I'm a dungeon master. Most of the time I'm looking for monsters or bad guys. I'm not spending that much time on each individual mini. If you're doing competitions, highly recommend the D&D HDs, but if you're looking for more quick paints that are going to be just fine, they're going to look good as long as you're halfway skilled with painting things, go with the bones. They're cheaper overall. They're perfectly fine. I think they're easier to paint in my personal opinion, and I've always just preferred them. I will say this though, for the familiar packs, I actually preferred the D&D HDs. The Bones familiars are really poorly molded, like they just don't have any detail at all, and a bunch of them that have wings are really top heavy, and they keep falling over, and you don't want that at the gaming table. You don't want something that's going to be constantly falling over if you're using minis. It's really annoying. Speaking from experience. So there you have it, you guys. There is a basic comparison of some of the Wizkids HD miniatures and some of the basic Reaper Bones miniatures. Hopefully you found this video helpful. And until next time, keep it rolling, adventurers.